How's it going, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The High Voltage Show. I'm your host, Steve Cravens, and today I'm going to be breaking down the top 10 best NFL games of the 2019 season. This is just my personal list. This is not a definitive list by any means. There were plenty of games that I wanted to include on this list that didn't make the cut. 2019 was just absolutely loaded with fantastic games. I mean, just across the board. I could do a top 20 list, frankly. You had great Sunday night football games. You had great Monday night football games, Thursday night football games. As a matter of fact, I have 2 Thursday night football games on this list, and that's saying something when you have great Thursday night football games. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the top 10. Number 10. Ravens versus Seahawks was one of those games that had plenty of momentum, plenty of hype coming into it. I mean, you had Russell Wilson and Lamar Jackson having MVP caliber years. Obviously, Lamar Jackson went on to win the award, but Russell Wilson himself was having just an unbelievable season. I mean, he put that team on his back and he carried them. I mean, he does that every season, it seems like. Ever since the Legion of Boom's been dismantled, he puts that team on his back every single year. And quite frankly, without Russell Wilson, the Seahawks would be absolute shit. They would be unwatchable. I mean, Pete Carroll would have been out of the job several seasons ago if they didn't have Pete Carroll. If they didn't have Russell Wilson. So both Wilson and Jackson had unbelievable games. I mean, despite what the final score tells you, 30-16, the game was a lot closer than that. What it came down to was 2 pivotal plays that really kind of swung the momentum in the Ravens' favor. The first one was the Wilson pick 6 to Marcus Peters. That really was kind of like, oh shit. That's when you could start to really feel like a little change in the game that, the Ravens were kind of getting the upper hand, because Wilson never, ever throws interceptions, certainly at home. And he never throws pick sixes. As a matter of fact, that was his first interception of the year, was that pick 6 to Marcus Peters. So, and I actually covered that game live at Fox on the day. I was doing the stats and research for it. So when that happened, I mean, we were all kind of like, what the hell? I mean, he never does that. So that was the first play that kind of swung momentum in the Ravens' favor. And the second one was that 4th and 2 run by Lamar Jackson where he ended up getting the touchdown out of it. You don't see the Seahawks defense falling for something like that. I mean, obviously Lamar Jackson's an elite scrambler. He's an elite rusher. I mean, there's a lot of defenses that wouldn't be able to keep up with him. But you never really see them give up that kind of yardage, that close to the goal line. Especially when you kind of have a feeling that it's going to be a run from Lamar Jackson, especially given that, Greg Roman is the offensive coordinator on the opposite side. He loves to run the ball with Lamar Jackson. But that being said, the Seahawks defense gave it up, and from that point on, the Ravens never looked back. Russell Wilson had a hell of a game, but Lamar Jackson had the better game. And obviously, the Ravens went on to win it, and it makes number 10 because it was so much fun to watch live. To watch the highlights, you can see, I mean, just both quarterbacks going back and forth. And both of them made some incredible plays, both with their legs and with their arm. And it was a lot of fun to watch, despite what the final score tells you. So that's my pick for number 10 is Ravens versus Seahawks. Number 9. Eagles versus Packers was the first great Thursday night football game of the year. It was at Lambeau. It was, incredible to watch. Aaron Rodgers go up against the Eagles defense. Carson Wentz go up against what was then coined as a great Packers defense. Obviously, they lost a lot of their sheen going forward into the season, but it was wonderful to watch. And the Eagles were 1-2 heading into this game. So if they had dropped this one, they would have been in some pretty deep trouble, and in all likelihood, the Cowboys would have gone ahead and won the division. As it happens, there were several things that prevented the Packers from winning this game. The first being Matt LaFleur's play-calling decisions towards the end of the game. And I'm talking specifically his decision to throw the ball 4 times on the 1-yard line. Have we learned nothing from Pete Carroll's idiotic, boneheaded decision in Super Bowl 49? Have we learned nothing? You decide to pass it 4 freaking times on the 1-yard line when you've got Aaron Jones in the backfield. I just don't understand it. I mean, I know that the Eagles' defense is great, especially against the run, but you didn't try to run it once. And the Eagles' defense stopped you 4 times. Now Jimmy Graham dropped it, a couple times. That's fine. We could go back and forth on this. If Jimmy Graham catches it, you're not criticizing Matt LaFleur's play calling decisions. But guess what? Jimmy Graham didn't catch it, and as a result, that's what cost him the game. It wasn't the interception that happened, towards the end of the game where, 20 seconds left on the clock. you can make the argument that, yeah, that cost them the game. But even if they had scored on that, go-ahead touchdown, then they would have been tied. Who knows what would have happened in overtime. That was what cost the Packers the game, was Matt LaFleur deciding to pass the ball 4 times at the 1-yard line. Absolute, that I'm sorry to say, it was just idiocy. I don't know who does that in this day and age. You don't even try to run the ball. But all the same, it was a great game. The final score was 34-27. Again, it was a game that the Eagles really, really needed. It kept their season alive, because to fall into that 1-3 hole, there's not a whole lot of teams that could bounce back from that, especially with the incredible amount of injuries that they had. So that's my pick for number 9, is Eagles versus Packers, an incredible Thursday night game and one of the best primetime games of the year as far as I'm concerned. Number 8. Number 8 is 49ers versus Seahawks. And as a 49ers fan, obviously, this game was so cathartic to watch. It was just, oh my God. Keep in mind, the 49ers had not won in Seattle since 2011, back when Alex Smith was the quarterback. There's been so much that's transpired since 2011. And again, there was so much at stake for this game. For those of you who don't know, this is actually the most watched Sunday Night Football game of all time. The ratings were absolutely through the roof because of everything that was on the line. You had an intense division rivalry game to close out not only the year, but the decade. And the winner of this game would determine a hell of a lot going forward. If the 49ers won, which they did, they would get the number 1 seed in the conference. And the New Orleans Saints would get the 3rd seed, and then the Seahawks would be relegated to the wild card spot. And then if the Seahawks won, this is where it got crazy. If the Seahawks won, then the 49ers would go to the 5th seed. The Seahawks would get the 3rd seed. And then the Saints would get the 1st seed, and the Packers would get the 2nd seed. So there was so much going on. So much was on the line for the game. The rivalry's already heated enough as it is. Both teams hate each other's guts. It's just, that was intense in itself. But having that added pressure for, the postseason implications was just, it just made it out of control. And then you had Marshawn Lynch coming out of retirement to come and play for the Seahawks one more time. Now, the reason that Marshawn Lynch came out of retirement to join the Seahawks was because the week prior, when the Cardinals came to play the Seahawks in Seattle, the Cardinals absolutely took a shit on them, first of all. And that was with Kyler Murray being injured. That was stunning. That was beautiful and stunning for me to watch as a Niners fan. But they also lost their 2 starting running backs, which was, talk about bad luck. That's about as bad luck as it can get. So Marshawn Lynch decided to come out of retirement and kind of help the Seahawks with one last, kind of push, because he said, they had unfinished business because of Pete Carroll's stupidity and not handing him the ball in Super Bowl 49 and whatever. I'm not going to get into that again. But anyway, Marshawn Lynch was back, and that had the 12s all fired up. There was so much energy in that game, in that stadium. It was unbelievable. That game was absolutely sensational to watch, and it lived up to the hype. It was a great game. The Niners dominated for the most part. Whenever they took the lead into the 3rd quarter, into the second half of the game. The 49ers defense held the Seahawks to 0 points in the first half, which is an incredibly rare achievement to do. And then, the Seahawks kind of came back into it, and it came down to the final minute of the game, really, where the Seahawks were able to get onto the 1-yard line. And then because of Pete Carroll's fucking arrogance, he tried to get Marshawn Lynch to come into the game and to kind of pound the ball in for the game-winning score, because they were on the 1-yard line, maybe even less than that. And because it took so long, because there was so much miscommunication going on the Seahawks sideline, it didn't happen, and they ended up taking a delay of game penalty, which pushed them back all the way to the 6th. So there you go. You didn't get to run. You were on the 1-yard line, and you didn't run it with Marshawn Lynch, and it cost you again. So that pushed him back to the 6-yard line, and therefore the game is in Russell Wilson's hands. You're not running the ball against that 49ers defense on the 6-yard line when you got to punch it in to win the game. And as it turned out, on 4th down, Russell Wilson passes it, and Dre Greenlaw makes the play of his life and stops their tight end on the 1-inch line. You look at that footage on the 1-inch line. They say football is a game of inches. Look no further than that play right there. It is a game of inches. His elbow and the ball came up at 2 inches tops away from crossing that goal line. And as a result, the 49ers won the game, won the division, and won the 1st seed in the National Football Conference. So there you go. That's my pick for number 8. It was an incredible game to watch. Still going back and watching it on YouTube, you watch it, it's like, oh my God, you think the Seahawks are going to pull it off, and once again, bonehead Pete Carroll didn't pull it off. So that's my pick for number 8, 49ers versus Seahawks Sunday Night Football, December 29th, 2019. Now, for number 7. Number 7, I might be cheating a little bit here because it is the divisional round game, Titans versus Ravens. I told myself I was going to just put regular season games, but at the end of the day, even though the playoff games were played in 2020, they still kind of count for the 2019 season. So I'm going to go ahead and put Titans versus Ravens here. Why am I putting it at number 7? It wasn't because it was a great game. It wasn't a great game. It was a humiliation. It was a beatdown. It was stunning. That's why I put it at number 7, is because of how jaw-dropping this game was. Everybody and their mother pretty much assumed that the Ravens would just kind of coast to the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs. That's what we all assumed. Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill, and Mike Vrabel said, no, that's not going to happen. Derrick Henry ran roughshod on the Ravens defense, the Ravens elite defense. I mean, he made them look absolutely pathetic. And the Titans defense, credit to the Titans defense as well, they held Lamar Jackson in check. Lamar Jackson hadn't played in 3 weeks up to that point. I mean, remember, they had clinched the number 1 seed weeks ago. So John Harbaugh, instead of risking injury to a lot of his starters, they decided to bench a lot of his starters and then keep them fresh for the postseason. And as a result, a lot of his starters didn't play for 3 weeks, and the rust showed. I'm not taking away any credit from the Titans or Mike Vrabel. I'm not taking away any credit. They deserved the win. They were unbelievable. But that said, that will give future coaches pause to give your players such a long break. 2 weeks is already pushing it. The Niners, for example, they played the last week of the season, then they had 2 weeks off before they played the Vikings in the divisional round, and they were, fresh enough. 3 weeks, that's way too much. That allows for way too much moss to grow there. I don't care how many times you practice, how much film you review. That's a lot of time to go between playing an actual football game, let alone a playoff game. So Lamar Jackson absolutely shit the bed for a second straight year. Let's not forget, back last year when he shit the bed against the Chargers at home again. And he just completely disappeared. He wilted under the pressure again. And the Titans defense took advantage of it. Derrick Henry took advantage of it. And Ryan Tannehill took advantage of it. I mean, that was the biggest upset I've seen in the playoffs since the Giants versus Packers game from the 2011 season in the divisional round, when the Packers went 15-1. And then Eli Manning and the Giants just came in and then just took a massive shit on them in Lambeau. I mean, that was stunning. I mean, that. And the refs tried so hard to keep the Packers in that game. I mean, no one could believe what they were seeing in that. So that's what I like in this game, too, is that Packers versus Giants game. Because it was so stunning. It was just, I mean, everybody just penciled in the Packers for another trip to the Super Bowl that year. Just like everybody was penciling in, at the very least, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens to go to the AFC Championship game that year, if not the Super Bowl. But again, I mean, great coaching from Mike Vrabel. Derrick Henry having the game of his life. He turned into a superstar that game, as far as I'm concerned. People can give Ryan Tannehill a lot of crap for being a game manager or average or whatever the case may be. The bottom line is, he outdueled Brady in Foxborough, and he outdueled Lamar Jackson in his home as well. And that's not easy to do. And he gave, Patrick Mahomes all he could handle in the AFC Championship game as well. So kudos to Ryan Tannehill for, getting out of that Dolphins funk that he was in, beating Marcus Mariota out for the starting job, and really just outdueling the MVP in his house in front of a national audience in an elimination game. That was just an unbelievable effort from the Titans. Couldn't be happier for them. Couldn't be happier for Tannehill, Derrick Henry, all of that team. I mean, the Titans are one of those teams where they never really seem to get respect, no matter how good they are, because they play in one of the weaker divisions. I mean, no disrespect to Deshaun Watson, he's wonderful, and no disrespect to Andrew Luck when he did play, but the AFC South has been kind of a joke. It's been the joke division of the NFL. They're kind of like the NFC East of the AFC. But that team is so much fun to watch. They are such a hard-playing, hard-hitting team. They give you all you can handle week in, week out. They've gone toe-to-toe with some of the best teams in the league, despite their 9-7 record. And they had a hell of a season. So kudos to the Titans and kudos to beating Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh's Ravens in their house in the divisional round. Again, not a close game, 28-12. It was a beatdown. It was a humiliation. But again, I put it at number 7 just for how shocking it was. It was just, I mean, I'm still shocked about it. I go back and I watch the highlights and I still can't believe my eyes. So that's my pick for number 7. Number 6. This might be a head scratcher for a lot of you watching this video because, a lot of you might not remember this game or think it's that significant. It was a hell of a game. Vikings versus Cowboys Sunday Night Football was absolutely unbelievable to watch. Remember, there was a lot at stake for these two teams. The Vikings were 6-3 and the Cowboys were 5-3. And, remember, the Eagles were keeping pace with the Cowboys in the division. The Vikings were trying to keep pace with the Packers in the division. There was a lot at stake for both of them, and it was a Sunday night game, so, again, national spotlight. I've always been, listen, I'm going to go ahead and just admit this right now. I have always been a Kirk Cousins fan. I think Kirk Cousins is criminally disrespected, underrated. I mean, he gets a lot of shit from Bears fans and from Lions fans and from a lot of fans all over the NFL. And Bears fans, shut your mouth, all right? Your quarterback is Mitch Trubisky. Shut up. But Kirk Cousins had that stigma of being, a choke artist in, primetime games. He can never really live up to it. No matter what the team, whether he was with the Redskins or the Vikings, no matter what the team they were playing, he always had that reputation for wilting under the pressure and just, straight up choking. This game, he shed that label. He showed up. And if the Vikings don't win this game, if Kirk Cousins doesn't show up in this game, I'm not convinced that they win the wild card game against the Saints. This was the game that really kind of gave not only Kirk Cousins but the entire Vikings team that momentum, that oomph to carry through with the season and really start pursuing the Packers. Again, it was a back and forth game. It was tied at halftime. It was 14-14 at halftime. Dak Prescott had a hell of a game. He actually outdueled Kirk Cousins in the stats. Ultimately, the only stat that matters is the score and the win-loss column. Those are the only stats that matter. Win-losses and, the score, the final score. And the Vikings ended up winning this one 28-24. Again, not really a memorable game for a lot of people. I like to talk about it a lot just because as a Kirk Cousins fan, as a big supporter of his, it was great to kind of see him rise to the occasion. And Dalvin Cook had a great game as well. Make no mistake about it. Dalvin Cook had a hell of a game. The Vikings defense had a hell of a game. I mean, they came up with stops at the end against Dak Prescott, who was on fire that game, and they really, put their own stamp on the game. So yes, that's I'm not taking away anything from the Vikings defense or from Dalvin Cook because they both showed up as well. But make no mistake, Dalvin Cook can have a hell of a game. The defense can have a hell of a game. But if Kirk Cousins doesn't show up and step up to the plate, they don't win that game, and they don't win a lot of the games that they did last year. So it was a hell of a game, very entertaining. Vikings take it 28-24. That's my pick for number 6. Wonderful, wonderful game. A lot on the line for both teams. Now, for the top 5. Number 5. We have another Titans game on here. Chiefs versus Titans. This was on November 10th, 2019. The final score was 35-32. Again, this is when we started to take the Titans very seriously because you never really knew what kind of, what Titans team were you going to get every single week because they would win some very impressive games and they would lose some games like, what the hell was that? This was the game where the national media, the national fan base, if you will, kind of looked at the Titans and were like, okay, these guys might be for real. These guys might have what it takes to go, pretty far if they get their shit together and they make it to the playoffs. Patrick Mahomes, this was his first game back from injury. He had a hell of a game. Derrick Henry again had a great game. The Titans defense, it wasn't their best showing. It wasn't the Chiefs defense best showing. Obviously, it was a very high scoring game. But we're talking about quarterbacks stepping up to the plate and quarterbacks really kind of, making their presence known and shedding labels. How about Ryan Tannehill here on the final game-winning drive? I mean, that was incredible. That was absolutely incredible. Game on the line. Ryan Tannehill carried his team down the field and got the game-winning touchdown and the game-winning two-point conversion, if you will, because that's what put them up, 3 points ahead of the Chiefs. So, again, you had a quarterback that has been much maligned by a lot of fan bases and a lot of the national media really kind of just step up against a very, very, I mean, they won the Super Bowl, for Christ's sake. The Chiefs won the Super Bowl. And despite Mahomes coming back from that knee injury, he was sensational. He was Patrick Mahomes. He was unbelievable. But Ryan Tannehill on that day said, no, I'm going to win this game. I'm going to will my team to the stunning upset, and we're going to really push forward and carry this momentum towards making a playoff appearance, possibly winning our division. But at the very least, we're getting that wild card spot in the AFC. And Ryan Tannehill, again, had the game of his life and carried his team on that final game-winning drive. I remember at Fox watching that game live. There was a bunch of us holding our breaths. We weren't even Titans fans. We're just wondering, is he going to be able to do it? Is the Chiefs' defense going to step up and be able to stop him? They didn't. And they didn't stop them on the two-point conversion either. So, again, incredible game to watch. This, and wildly entertaining. Scoring, left, right, and center. Not really too. This is one of those games where if it had made, in prime time, whether it was Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, Thursday Night Football, obviously we would be talking about it a lot more than we do. But unfortunately, it wasn't because, again, Titans very small market team. Again, if you haven't seen it, if you haven't seen the highlights, please, by all means, check it out. I mean, it was absolutely sensational to watch live, and the highlights are just as entertaining. So that's my pick for number 5, Chiefs versus Titans, November 10th, 2019. Final score, 35-32 Titans. Number 4. My pick for number 4 is the Los Angeles Rams versus the Seattle Seahawks, Thursday Night Football, October 3rd, 2019. This game was absolutely dynamite to watch. I mean, the Rams and the Seahawks have always had great games, even when, that derp Jeff Fisher was still there. I mean, he would always give Pete Carroll problems. Sean McVay's Rams have given Pete Carroll's squad nightmares. I mean, they just have never been able to figure them out. I mean, Sean McVay, ever since he's arrived as the head coach of the Los Angeles Rams, has just beaten down Pete Carroll's Seahawks like nobody's business. Even in the games that came up, very, very close in the past, the Rams still always had the upper hand. You never had a sense that the Seahawks were really going to take it. This game was dynamite. They have the full game up on YouTube for those of you who didn't watch this game or any of the highlights. Jared Goff had a great game. Todd Gurley had a great game. But at the end of the day, it was Russell Wilson that willed his team to victory, as is often the case. I mean, he was just absolutely sensational in this game. I mean, and to have those, those cool lime green Seahawks unis that they used against the Rams with the white, and I mean, it was just, division rivalry games are always a lot of fun to watch. I mean, that's the beauty of them is, obviously the teams know each other better than anybody. It doesn't matter, who it is. I mean, they know each other very well. They play each other twice a year. You can come up with any game plan you want. You think you might know their weaknesses, but guess what? They know your weaknesses and they know your strengths as well. So it's always going to be a dogfight no matter, who plays who. And in this case, it was an instant classic as far as I'm concerned. I mean, this was an absolutely incredible game to watch. So much fun, super intense. I mean, the crowd, the 12s were really into it, brought all the heat. And at the end of the game, it came down to a Greg Zuerlein missed field goal from 44 yards out. Jared Goff took his team back into field goal range, and Zuerlein, who used to be money, he used to be Mr. Automatic. I mean, he was up there with Justin Tucker and Steven Gostkowski and Robbie Gould as one of the best kickers in the league. He shanked it, 44 yards out. He just barely missed, kind of greasing it in there. And as a result, the Seahawks took the win, and it was a win that they desperately needed. It's a win that they had never had against Sean McVay's Rams. Again, the Rams actually had a lot of plays go wrong like that for them, like towards, the last waning seconds of games where they just, inexplicably, they just shit the bed. Whether it was Greg Zuerlein missing the kick or their defense giving up, a critical, third down conversion, whatever the case may be, the Rams always found a way to lose games, and that's why they went 9-7 and missed the playoffs. This is one of those games where they could have won. You could make the argument that they should have won it. For a majority of the game, Jared Goff was, he was outdoing Russell Wilson, which is not easy to do. But at the end of the day, Greg Zuerlein did miss that kick, and the Seahawks won the game. And, that's kind of what started sending the Rams down their, little downward spiral where they started losing games. They lost 3 in a row, as I recall. And the following Sunday, they got blown out by the 49ers in Los Angeles, where the Coliseum was taken over by red. It was beautiful. It was gorgeous to see. So that was the game where we really started looking at the Rams and be like, what's wrong with these guys? I mean, yes, Greg Zuerlein missed a 44-yarder. Yes, Jared Goff had a great game. Todd Gurley had a great game. But the Rams shouldn't be losing these games. They should be dropping more points on their opponents than they are. And then obviously the 49ers game that happened the following week, I mean, that just kind of, really put a nail in the coffin of the Rams season, even though they were kind of alive in it for a while there. That really, having those 3 losses straight, that was bad. But all the same, Rams versus Seahawks, incredible game, incredible primetime game. Great Thursday night game. Can't recommend it enough. If you haven't seen it, if you haven't seen the highlights, go ahead, check it out here on YouTube. Now, for number 3. Number 3 is still difficult to talk about as a 49ers fan. Seahawks versus 49ers, November 11th, 2019, Monday Night Football. Final score, 27-24 in overtime. As a 49ers fan, it pains me to talk about this game, but I can't deny the greatness of this game. This was one of the greatest games I've ever seen. It was back and forth for a while there. I mean, talk about momentum changes. The 49ers jumping out to a 10-0 lead, then the Seahawks taking the lead, then the 49ers coming back, tying it up, and then going into overtime. Missed field goal on the 49ers part, and then an interception on Russell Wilson. I mean, the game was absolutely batshit crazy. It was just, I mean, that was we were talking about the division rivalry game between the Rams and the Seahawks. 49ers, Seahawks, every time they link up, it is just, there's bad blood there. It might not be a close game, but I mean, they play harder and they play with such ferocity. You don't see that really. You'll see that from the Ravens and the Steelers. You might see that from the Packers and the Bears occasionally. But the Seahawks and the 49ers, they have, hands down, in my opinion, the best rivalry in football, especially since it's been renewed, since Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have built this team back up to a contender. That game was absolute dynamite. The 49ers were without Emmanuel Sanders and George Kittle and kicker Robbie Gould. And Joe Staley, coming back from the injury, I mean, Jadeveon Clowney just had the game of his life. I mean, if Jadeveon Clowney played that consistently, week in, week out, he'd be signed by now. I mean, he just embarrassed, poor Joe Staley on that game. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo making a couple mistakes, fumbling the ball, interceptions, whatever the case may be. Jadeveon Clowney was a one-man wrecking crew. And then you had the 49ers defense making Russell Wilson's life a living hell. I mean, they were sacking him left, right, and center. They got a fumble recovery when Wilson tried to do that ridiculous play where he tried to hand it off to his offensive lineman. Then he fumbled it. DeForest Buckner picks it up, takes it into the end zone to, score, kind of give the Niners life. Again, just a batshit crazy game. I mean, it pains me to think about it. Like, what if George Kittle had played? What if Emmanuel Sanders had played? Would the score have been different? Probably. If Robbie Gould had kicked that, kick in overtime, would the 49ers have won? Probably. But at the end of the day, I can't take anything away from the Seahawks. You can do all these ifs, ands, and buts, whatever the case you want to do. The fact of the matter is, Russell Wilson showed up and he outdueled Jimmy Garoppolo in his house on Monday Night Football. And no matter what the 49ers vaunted defense threw at him, no matter how many times they picked him off or sacked him, he just kept getting back up, using his legs like he always does, and was just rocking that ball down the field. I mean, it was a hell of a game. I wish it turned out differently, obviously, but at the end of the day, the Niners won the division. They won the first seed. It would have been sweeter if they had won that game, but kudos to Russell Wilson. Again, just a one-man wrecking crew that always finds a way. He seems to just will his team to victory every single week. Even on the teams they lose to, it's usually not due to Russell Wilson. So that's my pick for number 3, Seahawks versus 49ers, Monday Night Football. Absolute barn burner, instant classic in every sense of the term. Can't say enough about it. So kudos to the Seahawks, kudos to their fans for that game. It's an all-time classic, and they came out with the W. Now, number 2. Number 2 is Texans versus Saints, Monday Night Football, September 9th, 2019. This was the first game back in the Superdome since that infamous no call against the Saints in the NFC Championship game against the Rams. And that place was hyped. They were wired. I mean, the Superdome is always hyped. It's always wired. But that particular game was a lot of fun to watch because Deshaun Watson and the Texans showed up. That kid can ball. I mean, Deshaun Watson is just an animal. I mean, he's special. He is special. And, again, I'll never understand the Bears passing up on Deshaun Watson or Patrick Mahomes to draft Mitch Trubisky, but they're going to be regretting it for the rest of eternity as far as I'm concerned. I mean, watching Deshaun Watson go toe-to-toe with Drew Brees in his house was incredible to watch. I mean, the kid just has no fear whatsoever. And for a while there, I really thought he was going to win the game. And then Drew Brees did Drew Brees things, and he led his team on the game-winning score towards the end of the game, where Will Lutz hit that 58-yard field goal to, put the Saints up top and win the game 30-28. Deshaun Watson, it's kind of hard to talk about Deshaun Watson, these days and not really talk about the state of the Texans and what Bill O'Brien has done to that roster. I think it's absolutely incredible what he's done. All the talent he's given away. Whether it's Jadeveon Clowney, whether it's DeAndre Hopkins. I look at Deshaun Watson and I think this guy's not going to stick around for that much longer. How much longer can you waste your abilities, your skills on a team and an organization that just doesn't do what it should be doing to put a complete team around you? They're giving away pieces instead of bringing you pieces. Again, this kid is incredible. He can make magic happen with his legs. He can make magic happen with his arms. And again, I thought he was going to take this one against Drew Brees in his house. Obviously, it didn't work out that way. But you have to wonder, will Deshaun Watson stay in Houston, or will he go somewhere else? Will he go to a better organization that isn't run by a total idiot? So that's what I think about, obviously, when I go back and watch that game, is how wonderful Deshaun Watson is to watch. He's so much fun to watch. And he's also got that never say die attitude that Russell Wilson has. So, again, going to be very curious to see what Deshaun Watson does going forward. But again, number 2, Texans versus Saints. Watching that game live was absolutely unbelievable. That was the first classic of 2019 and the first great primetime game of 2019. So that was my pick for number 2. Now, for number 1. This one is pretty much, this is no surprise here. Everybody considers this to be the best game of the year. 49ers versus Saints, December 8th, 2019. Final score 48-46. This game was, I was covering this game at Fox. Obviously being the 49ers fan, they usually give me the preference on covering the 49ers games when I'm in there. And I got to tell you, I probably lost about 5 years off my life watching this game. Holy shit. Everything about this game was just instant classic. We're going to be talking about this game for years and years. The same way we talk about the Rams-Chiefs game from last year on Monday Night Football, we're going to be talking about 49ers Saints. Drew Brees had the game of his life. Drew Brees is, superhuman. We all know this. He's an unbelievable quarterback. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. We get this. What he was able to do to that 49ers defense was just like, what the hell is happening right now? 5 touchdown passes and a rushing touchdown for him on the day against that incredible, vaunted 49ers pass rush and against their secondary. Him and Michael Thomas, Jared Cook was having a hell of a game before he got taken out of the game by concussion. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and say this. Jimmy Garoppolo had the game that should have shut up the fucking doubters. Jimmy Garoppolo showed up. He had 4 touchdown passes. He actually equaled Drew Brees in the yardage department. And he made the plays when his team needed him to. Kyle Shanahan was dialing him up. He had that unbelievable circus play with, Emmanuel Sanders kind of chucking it to Mostert to take it in for the touchdown. That was unbelievable to watch. But Jimmy Garoppolo, when his team needed him, showed up. Because again, there was that game earlier in the year again on Thursday Night Football on Halloween against the Cardinals where the 49ers defense didn't show up that game either. And Jimmy Garoppolo had another 4 touchdown performance and he carried his team to, victory as well. He did the same thing against Drew Brees in his house. And, when we talk about this game, we're going to be talking about a couple of things. We're going to be talking about the wild touchdowns, the rushing touchdowns, how Alvin Kamara fumbled. He never fumbles. There were so many random things happening. There were so many, anomalies happening in this game that didn't happen for either the Saints or the 49ers other, than that game throughout the rest of the season. But the one play that is iconic that we're going to be talking about forever is the 4th and 2 play, the 4th and 2 conversion from Jimmy Garoppolo to George Kittle on the final game-winning drive, where George Kittle just looked like, the T-Rex at the end of Jurassic Park with the Velociraptors on top of him. He's just carrying them, willing them, closer to the end zone. And, you had that egregious, face mask call that put the 49ers even closer to kicking that game-winning field goal for Robbie Gould. I remember everybody was freaking out. All the people watching the game, it's kind of like, the Bridge of the Enterprise in there. We have a bunch of TVs up there, and then we have our own stations with the TVs there at Fox. And everybody, as soon as Kittle caught it and ran it, when he got the first down, we're like, okay, that's great. But when he kept going, and Marcus Williams got that face mask call on him, and he had the 3 Saints on him, and he's just like carrying them like the freaking beast that he is towards the end zone. That was just, oh my God. I can't even tell you what that felt like to watch. It was Oh, it was beautiful. It was beautiful to watch. And then with Robbie Gould, I mean, I'm pacing there. Strahan himself told me that he had actually put money on the 49ers to win that game. And I hear him screaming with the rest of us when Robbie Gould hit that game-winning field goal. I mean, it was just one of the best days of the 2019 season for me personally. I mean, it was just, and that's not to take anything away from Drew Brees and the Saints. They were ridiculous. They did everything they could have done to win that game. 46 points against that 49ers defense, unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable to do that to that defense. And to not come out with the win, I mean, the 49ers had to pull something out of their ass. I mean, Kyle Shanahan, he was dialing them up. Jimmy Garoppolo, Raheem Mostert, Tevin Coleman, Matt Breida, George Kittle, Kyle Juszczyk, Kendrick Bourne, Emmanuel Sanders. Everybody rose to the occasion, and they let the Saints know, no, you guys might be the favorites to win the NFC. The Packers might be the second favorite. No. To all the doubters out there, to all the people who still question us and tell us that we haven't played anybody yet, despite them absolutely demolishing the Packers on Sunday Night Football just a couple weeks prior, 37-8, and then going toe-to-toe with Lamar Jackson in Baltimore the week prior and losing by a 49-yard field goal from Justin Tucker in the hard pouring rain. No, they were for real. They planted their flag in the Superdome. They said, we're for real. We're going all the way. We don't give a damn who you are. We don't give a damn if you're a Hall of Famer. We don't give a damn if Sean Payton is arguably the best play caller in the NFL. All due respect to Andy Reid. That was the game of the year. You can watch that game in its entirety and still be in awe of Drew Brees and Jimmy Garoppolo going toe-to-toe, head-to-head, and just lobbing rockets at each other and just, frankly, putting together the most entertaining game I've seen, regardless of me being a Niners fan. Regardless of that, it doesn't matter who you're a fan of. Even Saints fans admit that is the game of the year. 49ers versus Saints, December 8th, 48-46 was your final score. If we're lucky, we're going to get another game like that this coming season in 2020 because the 49ers traveled to New Orleans to play Drew Brees and the Saints again. So I don't think it's going to come out that crazy, but hopefully it's just as good and just as riveting and just as just as batshit crazy as far as I'm concerned. I mean, that I cannot say enough about that game. That is the game of the year right there. So if you haven't seen it, if you didn't catch it, don't forget about the highlights. Just put the full game on. They have the full game on YouTube, all right? You got nothing better going on. It's the coronavirus out. You're in quarantine. What the hell are you doing? Put the game on. Enjoy the game. That is the game of 2019. So I've given you my top 10 for 2019. I hope you enjoyed it. And one quick note here on 2020. Obviously, we're going through a pandemic right now. Obviously, COVID-19 is out there. And yes, there have been several players that have tested positive for it. This is going to be very interesting to see. If the NFL goes ahead with the season for 2020, if they delay it, if they start it on time, are there going to be fans? Probably not, but who knows? We'll see. I mean, maybe they'll come up with a plan where they can have fans there and just have them spread out. It's going to be a very unusual year, but we have to prepare for the reality that there also might not be an NFL season. I hope to God there is one, but if players keep getting tested for coronavirus and keep testing positive. What can the NFL do to assure the players and the coaches that, we're going to keep you safe and we're going to keep you free from this shit? I mean, it's a contact sport. So it's going to be very interesting to see. That's pretty much why I'm doing this video now, even though it's, already, June. It's about to be July. Because, I miss football. I know you miss football. We all miss football. And there is a chance that we might not get football in 2020. So I'm going to be doing a couple football videos going forward. Again, I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but hopefully this stuff kind of gets cleared up more or less by the time September comes around. There's still plenty of time between now and then, and hopefully the players and the NFL come to an agreement on how to proceed with the season. It's going to be very interesting to see what the NBA and NHL do to kind of, let the players know that yes, you're safe and we're doing everything we can to keep you and your coaches safe. But that'll do it for me from the High Voltage Show. That was my top 10 of 2019. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you're staying safe, and I'll catch you next time. Have a great one.